Tower defense titles come in all shapes and sizes, but I don't think I've ever quite seen a tower defense game where your towers are people. That's right. Against Wokou Frontline, it's people. Watch on and find out. My name is Thoraxe, and this is Strategy for Busy People. If you've got a few minutes, I'll tell you what to play. Note, I always want folks to know about conflicts of interest, and the developer's marketer reached out and asked for this review, but I won't let it influence my thoughts. We've looked at quite a few tower defense games recently on Strategy for Busy People. This time I'm looking at Against Wokou Frontline by Yixia Studio. I put just under an hour into this title. As I mentioned in the intro, while tower defense games come in all different styles, I don't think I've ever seen or played one where your tower placements were actually people, and those people didn't move. But here we are. The background for Against Wokou Frontline is not surprising to anyone who is either a student of history or someone who watches a lot of Chinese action cinema. The title of the game includes the word Wokou, which roughly translates to, quote, Japanese bandits, describing the period starting in the 13th century where the Japanese would conduct raids on coastal Chinese areas. Given that background, it's no surprise that your towers are your Chinese fighters and your incoming hordes are the Japanese bandits. The game starts you off with a flashback type scenario with unlimited funds and upgrades for a small number of unit types to introduce you to the mechanics, which, if you've played a lot of tower defense games, should not be surprising. Place your towers, or in this case, people, on one of the available spots, kick off the scenario and watch the carnage unfold. And unfortunately, that's part of the pain of this game, because the carnage unfolds extremely slowly, with no opportunity to speed up the game. It's an awful lot like watching paint dry, and frankly, it's super frustrating. I hope they provide a fast forward button here soon, but I digress. Once you complete the intro scenario, you are dumped into the main game, which is where a traditional campaign begins to unfold, and you're also introduced to more of the game mechanics. Besides the, quote, watch hordes of attackers die part. Upon successful completion of a mission, you're awarded both skill points and stars, and each one can be used for different unlock purposes. On the somewhat obvious front, your skill points can be used to unlock skills. These are expected things like increasing hit points, distance of ranged attacks, speed, XP or money gain, and blah blah blah. No surprises here. On the slightly less obvious front, you also have these support skills that you can unlock. These are some specific attacks that are unrelated to your deployed towers, which have their own cooldowns. The snipe skill is a personal favorite, as it basically one-shots a specific attacker. Stars can be used to unlock additional units, and since the towers are people, it should be no surprise that those additional units are different types of soldiers. There are only melee and ranged units in the game. Somewhat period appropriately, you have either archers or musketeers, and then two types of infantry. Interestingly, the choice between musketeer and archer ends up being a kind of DPS type choice. I'm not entirely sure what the difference between the two infantry types is. It's obvious by looking at the spear spike unit, and it has a long pointy stabby thing, but it's unclear whether that weapon has more range than the heavy infantry sword or what. Missions involve a set number of waves. As things progress, the game will show you the path that the enemy will take. The goal is to prevent the enemy from breaking through your lines and getting into the town to kill your villagers. Villagers are essentially your hit points. Run out of them, and you lose. Deploying and or upgrading units costs money, and as time progresses and you vanquish the enemy, your coffers replenish. You can get a small refund for recalling a unit. If your units die, you can revive them for a fee, but there's also a cooldown before they can be revived. One of the interesting things about the game loop is that in later missions there are multiple paths that the enemy may take to come through the map, but you're limited in the total number of units that you can deploy. So, for some of the scenarios at least, you end up having to balance deploying units, recalling units, being strategic about placing ranged units versus melee units, understanding the path the animal will take, and so on and so forth. It looks like you can downgrade skills to recover skill points to change your skill allocation, but I didn't actually try it. Hey, before I give my final verdict, if this is your first episode, this one's free. But if you've watched me before, we're going to make an agreement. You help me level up by clicking subscribe, and I'll keep making these videos. I'll spend the time playing the games and making content that I hope you'll like, and you'll return the favor, okay? Leave comments, tell me what you think. It's all good. You just agree to engage. That's all I ask. The final verdict. So, while this game has some good bones, I have to say that it's really quite boring. Between the limited musical selection, the extremely limited sound effects, the mostly simplistic graphics, and most glaringly, the inability to fast forward, the game just plays like a slog through the mud. I didn't find the decision space particularly intriguing until the later missions. Maybe that's by design to ramp you into the difficulty, but there are only 6 missions in the story, and I can't imagine wanting to do 30 of these, even if they did introduce a whole mess of different unit types. On my trademarked 3-point score scale of avoid, meh, and I forgot to eat, Chinese wuxia cinema always involves tons of wine drinking and fighting, but somehow this game didn't even have rice to offer. It's sadly not very good, but it's also still quite early in its development. The addition of some more game mechanics and unit types might push it into so-so territory. In the end, though, I decided to patch up my pitchfork and head for the beach. Maybe I'll be able to catch some tasty zhendao for dinner.